because of our perspective. So, for example, right now I can only see the things that are in front of me. I can't, even though I'm in my house, I can't see everything in my house. So my perspective is limiting me to only view the things that are right in front of me. And our mental perspective does the same thing. Our mental perspective blocks us from seeing things that are beyond what we've already considered or what we think to be true. So our perspective needs to be changed in order to see things that are right now maybe hidden from us. They're just hidden because we can't see them. Also because of ignorance. So this is not a bad word. I don't mean dumb or stupid. I just mean, not knowing. That's what ignorance is. Means that, maybe we don't know something. And so part of the purpose of this teaching series is to explain these concepts to help people to gain the knowledge that they need so that their perspective can shift and they can also achieve awakening. And then the other one is lack of experience. So if you've never flown on a plane before, then you lack that experience. You have no idea how it works. And this is especially difficult when it comes to spiritual work because our experience is limited to only the things that we've already been through. And when you hear a master or a guru or whatever say spiritual insights, and they'll describe what awakening is or things like that, it sounds very far away. Sounds like you'll never be able to reach it, and it's because we lack that experience, so we don't really know what it's like. Also, our experience limits us. For example, if you've eaten a fruit that I've never tasted, you can describe it all you want, and but if I don't have the experience of it, I will not be able to understand what it tastes like. So when we, for people who haven't spiritually awakened or haven't fully awakened, they may be lacking the experience. And when other people describe what their awakening experience sounds like, they can't identify with it. They can't understand it. So these are hidden from us. And again, the point of the series is to help bring them out so that everyone has full access to them. I want you to know that through this series, you can ask questions at any time. If the calendar, it has like whatever, Labor Day, President's Day, Christmas, and we dedicate all these different days to all these different things. I want you to know this day is dedicated to you, so this is all about you. So please do ask any questions at any time. While I'm going through this presentation, if you have a question about something that I'm saying, hey, just stop me right then and ask. Like, let's make sure that that's really clear. You don't have to wait to the end for those questions. On the other hand, if you do have some things that you would like to ask about, but it's not related or it's not exactly some points that I'm covering, you can wait till the end, and I'll be here the whole time. So, however long you want to ask questions, like that's how long I'm going to stay to answer questions, and it can be about a different topic. Did you have something, Holly?
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to get a clearer understanding about awakening. Is it a state that you can achieve, or is a continuous process? And how does it feel like? How is the experience like to be awakened?
Okay. Let's save that one to the end. It's a really good one. And as a matter of fact, I may end up doing like maybe next week will be completely in depth. But let's save that one to the end. Um, and then I'll answer those. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes,
Okay.
it's okay.
So again, it's what is awakening? Is it a continuous process? It seemed like there's a third point. Could you remind me, or maybe you can just remind me at the very end?
Okay. Like I was asking if it's a continuous process or it's an end
Okay.
that one can achieve. Like, yeah.
Okay. Yep. So that's easy enough. So it'll take a little bit of explanation. There's not a quick answer. That's why I'd like to save it for the end so we can kind of talk through it a little bit more.
Okay.
All right. So last week was the first one ever. So small beginnings, but I just want to recap some of the things that we covered last week. First, I covered a little bit about myself. Um, After about 10 years, but longer than 10 years of practice, this was off and on. I wasn't like dedicated to everyday meditation. As a matter of fact, I was in a church, and when I would go to learn about meditation, um, I had to do it secretly because if they found out that I was doing meditation, they would have thought that I was trying to become a Buddhist monk or something, and they would have, stoned me or something crazy. So I had to like be really secretive about it. But about 2 years, so in 2010, I began a serious everyday practice of at least 30 minutes a day and an hour on Saturday and an hour on Sunday. And then in the very end of 2011, life gave me a huge favor and gave me a crisis that was the most difficult thing I'd ever been through at the time. And it finally ended in 2012. And through that crisis is the very thing, along with my practice, that facilitated my own awakening. And in that, I discovered there is a way out of suffering. Suffering is something that we're doing, and since it's which is great because if we're the ones doing it, then we can also stop doing it. If we're suffering and it's completely out of our control, then we just have to keep suffering. That's really miserable. But our suffering really is something that we're doing to ourselves. And through awakening, I saw the way out. And the other thing I saw was basically the nature of all reality. And these two things liberate you. And there's a liberation that comes when you realize the situations you were stuck in before and how that you suffered in them. When you become free from that, just that realization alone brings its own happiness and joy, because even if you're still in the situation, but you're no longer stuck in the situation of suffering. That in itself is very liberating and brings a lot of peace, happiness, and joy to you. Also, I covered that experience is how we change, and I'll recap that one little piece on that because I'm building today's lesson off of last week's. And I gave the breathing meditation basics. So, for example, the posture, the duration, and the timing are some of the big key points that I brought up last week. And I think I have a slide this week that will cover some of those highlights again. And of course, if we have any questions on diving deeper into meditation, we can certainly take those. All right. So in this presentation, what I plan to cover is the nature of reality. That is,
Hello, sir.
yes, are you there?
Yes. Please, can you speak a little about the pusher and then, sorry, the timing and the duration with regards to the breathing meditation? I want to get a clear distinction between the two.
Okay. So I've got a slide on meditation here. Let's dive in deep on that slide. That's a really good one.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so in this presentation, we'll cover the nature of reality, and I'll start you on the direct path to understanding and uncovering the nature of reality. And like I said, we'll get to some meditation. So I'll go over some more of the meditation basics. And Holly, during that time, like feel free to ask a million questions about meditation, even if they're not on the slide. I'll be happy to answer them then. All right. So with the direct path, um, the value of doing this, the thing that you get out of it is you begin to see things as they truly are. I can tell you, this may sound mystical, but I can tell you that the way we see things before we awaken is actually an illusion. And we're the ones that are deluding ourselves into believing that things are the way they are. Now, don't that doesn't mean that, like, if you say, but Omni, I can actually see the desk in front of me, or I can see that car. I'm not saying that those things are not real. I'm saying the way that we see them is through an illusion. The way we interpret situations and other people is through an illusion. So when we see clearly the nature of reality, we'll begin to be able to see things exactly as they are. In seeing it, you can achieve, and you will achieve an unmovable peace. That means no matter what the problem is, it doesn't mean you will have a problem-free life. Like there's no guarantee for that. But when you're in the problems, you can be completely happy and not disturbed by what the problems are. So if today your world is really, shaken, you're tossed around by difficulties, problems, things people are doing or saying, and things like that, you can achieve an unmovable peace where, again, when you're in the middle of problems, they just don't affect you like they do today. So naturally, you'd be able to handle difficulties with ease, and you'll experience longer and longer periods of happiness and bliss. And this grows until eventually, I wouldn't say that like 24/7 you walk around in this like dreamy bliss state, but you can certainly always have a baseline of peace and maintain happiness and bliss almost all the time. Of course, there are times when you focus very narrowly on things and like you're really intense about your work. You may not realize that at that moment you're happy, but you'll still have a happiness in your background instead of a misery or a suffering type feeling always going on in your background. So uh, here's the slide from last week. Maybe it'd help if I move myself out of the way. Let's see if I'm still in the way. So we have results in life. That's what's going on around us today. The situations that we're in, and a lot of times we want to change our results. We don't like the life that we have. So one of the things that we try to do is we go to work on our actions. Here, let me just actually get completely out of the way. So we try to change our actions. So we say, if I have this habit of getting up in the morning, I can have this result. Or if I have this habit of changing my diet, then I'll get, weight loss or whatever the different results are that we're trying to do. Oftentimes that doesn't work. And the reason why is our actions actually come from our beliefs. Haldy, can let me see. I'm gonna mute you for now because we're getting some noise from you. So when you come back to ask questions, please do unmute yourself. All right. So the reason why our results actually don't change is because the actions that we take, like I said, going like starting a diet or whatever, they're founded on our beliefs. And if our beliefs don't change, our actions won't change because our actions come directly from what we believe. And the truth is, what we believe almost always comes from our experience. There are some things that we believe just because someone told us, which is technically an experience, but we most of the time we have a foundational experience of having done something, and that informs our beliefs. So, for example, people that want to lose weight, uh, well, when they were young, they could eat a bowl of ice cream and they didn't gain weight. So their experience is they can eat a bowl of ice cream, they don't gain weight. So now they believe I can eat a bowl of ice cream and I won't gain weight. So what's their action? They eat a bowl of ice cream. And then, later in life, in their late 20s, 30s, they start gaining weight. The results begin to change, but their belief doesn't change because their belief still is I can eat a bowl of ice cream and I won't gain weight. So we have to change that experience. And people that are for example, radically do weight loss, they radically change their experience, completely drop sugar, carbs, whatever. They go on some extreme diet, which then gives them different results. So they change their actions drastically. It gives them different results. And those results then become the experience that, oh, if I change how I eat, so it changes their beliefs. If I change how I eat, and I eat differently, then I'll get better results. And now it turns into this virtuous circle of constant improvement. Um, Now, in spiritual terms, I want to label that experience as seeing. There's a very specific way that you can, uh, there's a very specific way of going through an experience that I want to call very specifically something spiritual called seeing. And so let's take a look at what seeing is. Seeing requires an experience. So you have to have an experience. An example I used last week was, for example, someone who doesn't understand technology, electricity, or anything. We just grab someone that lives, in a stick hut and bring them to my house. They can watch me put food in a microwave, for an example, press some magic buttons. A minute later, take the food out and it's really hot. So they have the experience, the same experience that I have. But in order to see clearly, they also have to have the correct view. So my correct view is that it takes a lot in order for that to actually work. Like electricity, the microwave has very specific components. I have to press very specific buttons in a very specific order in order to get that to work. So I have a much clearer view. The person that we took that has no experience with that, they may think they could just make a cardboard box and draw some magic buttons on the side, and like put their food in, press their little magic buttons on the cardboard box, and then when they take the food out, naturally it's not hot. So they don't have the correct view, so they can't figure out how this works. They may even, if like let's say I leave and go somewhere and they're at my house, they may even think they could put food in and just like randomly hit keys. And so they're using the right box, they're using the microwave, they're using the right keys, but they don't have the correct view of which keys to actually hit, so it doesn't work for them. And in order to achieve seeing, being able to see something really clearly where we completely understand it and have a working knowledge of it, it also will require focused inquiry. So we have to spend time looking deeply into whatever it is that we're trying to understand, and we have to have the experience to go along with it, and we also have to have the correct view. So there are a lot of things that I've met, or a lot of things people believe, that I people whom I met in religion especially, they have very different beliefs, and all of they even come from experience. They say, well, I know this one time when I was a kid, you know, fill in the blank, some kind of thing happened, and they say, so this is why I believe what I believe. But then when they tried to reduplicate that experience and do it again, they just like the the guy putting his food in the cardboard box and hitting his little buttons he drew on there, like nothing happened. So they can't understand why something happened that seemed magical, or whatever, very unnatural, supernatural, when they were young. They can't understand why it's not working that way today, but they still have the belief that that's the way the world works. So what we have to do is use focused inquiry to really look into experiences that we're having, so that we can formulate the correct view in order to see things very clearly. And this is one of the most key components to the direct path to seeing reality exactly like it is. And so we want to use all the tools that we have for inquiry, and I'm going to list them. It's a very short list. So we have sight. So the things, seeing is one of the tools that we have for inquiry. Sound is one of the tools that we have for inquiry. Taste, touch, smell, and thought. So seeing, or the ability to see, is one of the tools. Hearing, or sounding, having sound, is one of the tools. Being able to taste, being able to touch, and sense things tactile wise, smell, and then thought. And so I know that in the West, we typically say the five senses, and it's only those first five whenever they list out the five senses that we have. But really, if we look into it, and you can do it at any time. You can even do it right now, or especially during meditation. If you just focus on what am I, and I'm receiving these different types of inputs. So I get sights, sounds, taste, touch, smell. Well, you also get thoughts. So thoughts are also something that you're sensing, and it's an internal sense. So that's why they didn't count it as one of the five senses. And I think that actually leads to an identity crisis, and we can talk about that more in depth. But I want to emphasize that on the direct path, not only are these the tools that we have for inquiry, but these are the only tools that we have. We cannot depend on anything else. And the good news is you don't have to. So this isn't a Omni has this special little thing and he proved the way the universe works, and you just have to trust me on it. No, you get to go find out for yourself, and you get to use your own six senses to see what reality is. And many of the great teachers in the past all said to not take their word for it, but go find out for yourself, and then build your beliefs off of your own experience. And I echo that exact same sentiment. So it's great that you can just use your own six senses. There's nothing else needed. You don't have to go to the store and buy something. You don't have to read some special book. You don't have to have a special ability, that like, oh, well, spiritual people, they have an additional thing that they have. No, all of us have these same six, and you get to use them yourself. All right. So we want to use all the tools that we have for inquiry. And so, did I put that slide in twice? Um, and how we use them, I guess I did. How we use them is through practice. Our practice of using those tools is meditation. And so let's talk about a very specific meditation practice. So last week I talked about breathing meditation. We'll cover it again. And this, by the way, fits in with breathing meditation, but it is something separate. So in this specific meditation, to begin to look into the nature of reality, this really is how easy and simple it is you just need to pick one of your five senses. And then you need to determine its boundary. And I'll go through an example in a second to show you what that means. You need to look at what it was before or ahead of whatever that sensation was. and then what was after that sensation that you had, and then in that entire experience, ask what is it that you are? What are you in that experience? So let's take an example. So, for example, we picked hearing as one of our five senses that we're going to use, and so we determine its boundary. So let's take an example like if I hear a car passing down the road, was hearing out there on the road. Let me switch the camera. Was hearing out there where the car was on the road and hearing traveled through to me? Is that how hearing actually worked? Um, so was it somewhere out there coming to me? What was before it or ahead of the sensation of hearing? So, what things did we already have to have? We could say, well, we had to have the car. Well, technically, you didn't have to have a car to hear, because I could have a sound on my phone that sounds like a car, and I could play that, and someone would think a car was going by. So we didn't have to have the car. So we begin to think about what are the actual ingredients or the things that were necessary in order for this sensation of hearing to arise. And then what happened after that? So the sound was heard, and then what happened after the sound was heard? What was the result of that? Where does that go? What's the effect that that has? If we say a sound happens, let's say it happens right on our ear, in our eardrum, well, then what happens after that? Well, someone who believes in the physical world, materialism, they may say, well, then, signal goes down the nerve, goes into your brain. And then the question is, okay, but what happens to it after that? So it's in your brain. Your brain has this sensation sent to it that's saying there's a sound out there. And then what happens after that? These are the things that we want to look into during meditation. Now, I'll have to warn you, I'm asking the questions or giving you the questions to think about. But if I tell you the answers, then you just end up believing me because, Omni said so, and that's not going to do you any good. So and it may take time. It does take time. Remember, I meditated for a long time as part of this practice. Now, I didn't have anyone that was actually helping me like this. I did have teachers, but I didn't have any teacher that said, hey, here's the shortest way to do this. Let's go do these very specific things. So I didn't have that kind of help. So these direct questions will help. And my hope is that you'll awaken much faster than I did, and experience the same freedom much faster than I did. And I'm telling you, this is the fastest way I've found to do it. But you'll have to come up with the answers yourself. And then the last one, through that entire experience of that sound, what came before the actual experience of the sound and what comes after, ask yourself through that entire experience, what is it that you are? What are you in that exact experience? And the reason why we want to do that through meditation is because in meditation, I've said that meditation is like you have a desk that you're going to do work on, and meditation clears off space on that desk for you to be able to do the work. So that's one of the points. So we would want to start meditating and have a good practice of meditation, and then begin to do these inquiries like the one that I just gave. So let's recap a little bit. And Haldi, this is where we can answer your questions on meditation. So let me just cover the basics, and then let's make sure we answer your questions on that. So, bodily position, as was covered last week, and this is not all. Like this is just the highlights of some of the things that were said last week. So, if you want more detail, they'll be there. Be in a comfortable enough position that you're not suffering. So, I have times when I meditate, my tendon on my leg gets stretched, and at around 40 minutes, it really starts hurting, and for the next 20 minutes it becomes almost insanely unbearable. But I use that as an object lesson. When I get up, it stops hurting like within a few minutes, actually probably 30 seconds. Usually my leg goes to sleep. And once my leg takes about 30 seconds to wake back up, by then that tendon pain is also gone. So when I say be comfortable enough not to suffer, you may be uncomfortable. But if you get up and you're still hurting like an hour later because you were sitting wrong, like that's doing something wrong. And as we discussed last week, I think it was Sam was saying that Samantha, she was saying that she must have been sitting wrong. And there's a diagram here that shows the proper way to sit because her back would always hurt. So you don't want to have constant growing pain like that, especially if it continues to hurt after you get up. But you do want to be uncomfortable enough that you don't go to sleep because usually we're very sleep deprived. So when we finally sit down and we're very calm, it's easy just to start going to sleep. So usually, like, I'm sitting in a chair with a back, but I'm actually not against the back of the chair. I'm sitting forward, so this keeps me upright. And it's very common. I don't meditate in this chair, by the way. I'm just showing that, like, I'm keeping my body right now uncomfortable, which is keeping me alert. And if you sit in a chair, don't lean back against the back of it if you're going to meditate, but sit up away from the back and just use the flat part of the chair is the only thing that you're actually touching. It's very common to sit on a zafu, which is just a big round cushion, which is what I use when I meditate. Or some people will use like a wooden straight back chair. The reason why I say wooden is at least the seat has to be hard. If you sit in a very soft, big plush chair, you'll always feel like you're rocking around and you're having to maintain your balance, which uses your muscles. And if you're using your muscles, eventually you'll get tired. So if you're sitting in a straight back chair, let me once again get myself out of the way. Even if you're sitting in a chair, you want to do the posture that's on the right. So if you're using a Zafu cushion, then you if you sit flat on the floor, your back will be arched like it is on the left. It just naturally arches because our legs, if I could come back to the camera, our legs are up, and so our hip that sits, our hip is right behind our legs, so our legs push our hip back, and then we arch our back and lean forward in order to compensate, just like you see in this picture. And you may not, even on the left, you may not rest your arms on your legs like that person is doing, but that's still the shape of our back when we're seated flat on the floor. It's really difficult with the way our hips are made to be able to sit up straight. Some people can, most people can't. So if it's recommended to use a cushion that elevates your back so that your legs can go down. And when your legs go down, then your back is not pushed backwards. And so you can keep it straight. And as you can see in this picture, the ideal is that you're just like this person, they're sitting there and their spine is like a straight column and it's completely supporting their entire body. They're not using their muscles to keep themselves straight or to keep themselves seated. And if you're seated correctly like this, you can sit for a very long time, like hours. Now, it may take time to build up endurance. I'm not saying everybody needs to meditate hours. Please don't take that. And it may take time if you're like, hey, I want to meditate for an hour on weekends. That sounds like a great idea. But it may take your body some time to adjust to getting used to being seated like that, and being completely comfortable, just especially if you've never done it. Just like any other form, like if you were stretching or if you were running, you just can't go run a marathon. It takes preparation. And if you're like stretching your body out, if you start stretching your body every day, well, in a year, you can stretch yourself a lot further than how you're stretching yourself today. So you just have to give your body some time to adjust. And also, we covered breathing, that to focus on the physical sensation of breathing. So for me, I feel the sensation of air right, or some people feel the sensation of air right at their nose. I do a little bit, I feel it a little bit more on the inside. So when I inhale, I can feel cool air just on the inside. And when I exhale, I can feel warm air on the inside of my nose. But I really feel it back in my sinuses. I can really feel the airflow going back and forth in my sinuses. Some people, they feel their abdomen, stomach push out and come back and push out and come back. So they feel that's where they feel the sensation. But the one thing you don't want to do is just focus on the thought of it. It's like, okay, I'm breathing in. Okay, I'm breathing out. Like that's not the correct focus. You want to really pay attention to the physical sensation because that helps cement you back in to one of those six senses that we talked about earlier, which is on the path to awakening. And so if you're just always in your mind, you're actually taking on the identity of mind instead of being able to stay focused on a sensation that you know that you aren't. You're not the air that's moving in and out. And you may end up discovering you're also not your nose. So a good example of that, if someone thinks they are their nose, what happens to somebody who gets their nose chopped off? Are they now not a person? Are they less of a person? Did they lose some part of themselves? Most people would say no. So we know that we're not really our nose. So we can just focus on the sensation without being identified as a person who's doing it. I would set an initial goal that within 30 days of starting meditation, that you would build up to being able to do 30 minutes a day. 10 minutes, the first 10 minutes of your meditation time will be just getting your thoughts and your mind and your focus to come together. And so I imagine like going to the gym. So you drive there or walk, however you get to the gym, you change your clothes. That's like the first 10 minutes of meditation. And then as soon as you change your clothes and you're ready to do your workout, you say, okay, I'm done for the day. I'm going to go home. That's the first 10 minutes. We're just getting ourselves ready for the real work. And every minute you can spend in meditation after those first 10 minutes is where the real benefit comes, because it takes, again, that first 10 minutes for us to settle completely down. So if you can start with 5 minutes, that's great. Please do start with 5 minutes, work your way up to 10 minutes, then to 15. My recommendation is see if you can get to 30 minutes a day within 30 days, within a month. And so specifically what I want to cover on this one, so that's a lot of recap from the past for some of you, but set your expectations with meditation. Mastery isn't a goal. So like I'm a master meditator. Like there's no such thing. So don't set that as your goal, but just the effective focus is. And so this is what I want to touch on today. So your mind will wander. So it's very natural. I'm focused on the sensation of breath, and the next thing you know, I'm thinking about work or what somebody said or what I'm going to do next week or some place that I went last week. Whenever you realize that your mind has wandered, without any judgment, just bring it back to the sensation. Here's why: because that meditation is focused on the sensation itself. So when your mind wanders, that's technically not meditation. But also, if you say, "Oh my God, my mind wandered again. I can't believe it. Like I'm not any good at," well, that's also not meditation. That's focusing on something else. That's focusing on complaining or whatever. But meditation is, or breathing meditation is, just coming back. It's like, okay, the mind wandered, great, back to the breath. And it doesn't matter. You can say, "Oh my goodness, I had the greatest session in the world. My mind never wandered. I stayed focused on, my breath the entire time." And then the very next time you sit down, it's like your mind does nothing but wander. And you can say, "Oh, this is the worst meditation I've ever had. It's horrible." And I would say neither one of those statements are true. The practice itself of sitting down and dedicating the 30 minutes, whether your mind wanders or not, is the practice of meditation. And there's benefit in that, even if the mind is wandering. So don't become judgmental and say this was a good session, that was a bad session. Because even the ones where it seemed like your mind was always wandering and you brought it back, you're still building that muscle of being able to bring your focus back to the one thing that you want it to be focused on. And then there are all the physiological effects, like the parasympathetic system, that's reducing, it literally is reducing stress while you meditate. So there's a lot of benefit, even if your mind is wandering. So don't think, "Oh, that's a bad session." Don't even think, "Well, this was a better session and that was a worse session." Those statements are not true. If you sat there for 5 minutes, whatever happened, that was a good session. Congratulate yourself. If you sat there for 30 minutes, no matter what happened, congratulate yourself. That was a good session. And also an attachment to an experience will be very harmful. So the way my brain works, when I see visualizations a lot. Um, there are many different things I can tell you, experiences that I have about seeing visualizations, but definitely when I sit down and meditate, I close my eyes, like I see a lot of things go on in my head. And for every one of them, I can say you just have to ignore them. If you get attached to, "Oh, I'm seeing these lights," or I'm, whatever, even emotions like, "Oh, I felt so blissful, felt so peaceful," then you can become attached to that. In the beginning, it may be okay, like to help you establish the routine of meditating. But what can happen is 60 days later, 180 days later, a year later, you turn into one of those people where you have to have all these crazy experiences in order to meditate. And by the way, that's not meditation, because you're not actually learning how to focus. You're just learning how to let your your mind wander all over the place with crazy things, visualizations, experiences, emotions, all those things. And none of that is meditation. So people that even come to me and they say, oh my goodness, I had this, great vision. And that becomes a trap for them because then they think every time I meditate, I need to go do that. My advice from my experience is completely avoid those things. Like they're not benefiting you at all. They're wasting your time and they're distracting you from true practice. All right. Yeah. So again, good or bad meditation sessions, there's no such thing. And then monkey mind, that's the mind that just constantly wanders. You'll just have to deal with it and always bring it back to focus. And with that, in the very beginning, at the best, the best experience. If you want to go for an experience, the best experience you can have is going to be boring, because if you're just starting meditation, you'll have to fight being uncomfortable. You'll have to fight not having the discipline of doing it. You'll have to fight, like if you decide to do it by getting up early in the morning, you have to fight that, like now I have to get up earlier or whatever. So there are a lot of obstacles. Then when you sit down, my legs go to sleep, my back hurts, like whatever those different things are. And the mind constantly says, yeah, why don't you just get up and go do, fill in the blank, something that you had on your mind. So all of those things are weights that you just have to be patient, and they will stop, especially within 30 days, they'll be gone. But during that period of time, the best that you could ever have will be boring, because um, if you could just have a boring session, then you won't have all that negativity that you're having to struggle with. And eventually, again, within the first 30 days, you should reach that where I'm just a person who sits down, and it may seem like it is boring. And that's where these specific practices of inquiry come up. All right, so this actually goes back to the nature of reality. So let's go back to the slide. So, um, Haldi, I'll ask you to unmute. Let's come back and answer your questions on meditation if you're still available to talk.
Okay, I have a couple of questions to ask, and the first one is with the practice. You said we should pick one of our physical senses to do the practice, and in your presentation, you chose hearing.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, is that particular practice in itself a meditation, as exactly as the breathing meditation, or just, I don't know. I'm trying to get the differences.
Yeah.
Can you focus on hearing as a standalone meditation tool, or just as the breathing meditation? I don't know whether you get the question correct.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because that helps me clarify. It may be in one of the next slides that I haven't gotten to yet, but again, thank you very much for asking this, because it's important to clarify. So I have multiple types of meditation. All of them start with breathing, and all of them are founded on breathing meditation. So I was very fortunate that one of my early teachers taught Vipassana meditation, which is insight meditation. Insight meditation starts with just breathing, so the focus is strictly on our breath and the sensation of breath. So a lot of that, like all of that instruction on breathing meditation, all comes from Vipassana. I went on even to study it to get certified as an instructor in it, because I wanted to make sure that I was aware of everything related to Vipassana meditation. So, yes, the foundation of every meditation that I have is breathing. So now, how does that relate to the hearing one? So the hearing one is an exercise to look at the nature of reality. How would we use it? So we would start with a breathing meditation. No matter what meditation I'm planning on doing, I start with a breathing meditation for at least 10 minutes. Again, I want my mind to settle. I want my focus to become very sharp. And then it's kind of like it takes those 10 minutes to clear off my desk. And once my desk is clear, now I can specifically do like the hearing meditation, or there are other ones, like I have an embodiment meditation. There's specifically insight, or the Vipassana one. The insight meditation is a different one. I would take some time to describe it, but each of all of those, for me, I start with the foundation of breathing. So then if I begin to look into how hearing is operating, what can happen then? The mind wanders, and all of a sudden I realize I'm not actually focusing on hearing anymore. And so using breathing meditation, I come back to breathing meditation. and for maybe a few breaths, and then go back to that hearing exercise again. So breathing, for me, the breathing meditation is the foundational start of all of them, because that's actually clearing off the space in our mind for us to be able to focus, like clearing your desk so that you can start doing work. Does that help?
Yes, it's very, very, very helpful. T- and the second question is, when through meditation, you said you'll be able to see things as truly as they are.
Mm-hmm.
So with the desk example you gave, you said there is a desk right in front of you,
Yes.
but you seeing it as truly as it is. How does meditation help you to achieve that? Is it that it will change your perspective about the desk, as in before you started meditation, before you started or before you achieve awakening, how you saw the desk to be will be different after being awakened? Like, is it your
Yeah. So that's a very good question. So the question is, how does meditation actually work to change your perspective to see things as they truly are? So, really good question. I would say it begins progressively, uh, and it's not. There's several different things that we have to see the way they are. The first one I would say is we need to understand ourselves. We need to see ourselves exactly the way that we really are. So I'll give you my personal um, experience with that. Early on, so as a child, um, because of some of the things that I went through, different traumas that I had, um, I I grew up. I just saw that Haldy dropped. Hopefully, he'll be able to come back. Um, the traumas that I had caused me to dive deeper into my mind and the way that I would think, and basically cut off the way that I was feeling, cut off all the sensations, especially the negative emotions that I was experiencing in my body. As I grew older, I I realized one day that my thoughts are not really me, and the way I realized it was not through meditation. It was through I would begin to fast, for example. So one thought was, I want to fast. I want to not eat food for like 3, 5, 7 days. And then what would happen is thoughts would always come up of, yes, but don't you want to eat this? And don't you want to eat that? And so, for several days, for at least the first 24 hours, you're fighting that, those other thoughts that are coming up. And I realized, okay, so if I'm the thoughts, then I'm having this thought that says fast, and I'm having this completely opposite thought. So like, who's the real me here? Like, what's really going on? And so there's this koan, I think it's a Zen koan, that says thoughts without a thinker, and it's just the koans are puzzles that we begin to understand. We sit down and try to crack the puzzle to understand its meaning, because its meaning is hidden, and it's like something mentally you can chew on for a while. And so with this one, the point of thoughts without a thinker is that there are thoughts that are happening, but there's not actually a person or a me that's back there making those thoughts. Actually, the reverse of this is true. What's really happening is there's me who is aware of these thoughts, just the same way there's a me who's aware of these sounds. There's a me that's aware of these sights. Now, I say me, I'm using that as a conventional term. It may be another discussion we have to have another day, but it doesn't mean that there's a self, or that the me that I think that I am is actually real. I'm not using it in that sense. I'm just saying that you begin to realize that those sensations, those six sensations, aren't you, and the source of them, where they're coming from, also is not what you are. So that's one of the very beginning things that begins to shift. Now, taking it to something like the desk, this gets really deep into philosophy, and I think it takes these other discoveries first before you can begin to understand objects in the world, like desks, other people, things like that. Their existentialism, their existence, the way that they are, is something that's understood first by understanding what you are, and that takes time. Another thing that actually will precede, um, seeing things like the desk the way that it really is seeing other people and situations much more clearly, and we begin to realize through meditation, without even awakening, we can begin to realize and identify and see that the way we perceived people is incorrect. So we see something happen with people, and there's something that happens before it becomes conscious to us, where it gets colored with a negative emotion or positive emotion. And that's why two different people can do exactly the same two things. And this guy I like, and so therefore I think it was okay for him to do it. And this guy I don't like, so therefore I think it's not good for him to do it. And these things happen. You can actually catch that happening inside, and you can be aware of that exact shift that's happening inside as it's happening within you. This is from gaining a lot of mental awareness, and that one is achieved. That it gets stronger through meditation. All right, so Holly's not here for me to say if there are any other questions about that, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. Hope he can come back. All right. So I believe the practice that I went over with the hearing meditation, my my thought is once you can meditate regularly for about 15 minutes, then you can begin these additional inquiries. So you can use the first 10 minutes to settle your mind, and then you can use the rest of that time for your current practice. So if you're meditating 20 minutes or 30 minutes, then just use the first 10 for breathing meditation, and use the rest for these other practices that we'll be covering. Now, you don't have to. You can just do breathing meditation the entire time. Sometimes I feel like that's all I need to do. It's like my mind is so scattered, or I feel too upset. So I just need to sit down and focus breathing to center myself for 30 minutes. And I don't, it's not necessary to do a practice. I would rather just get the focus time in. So that's totally up to you. But one thing that won't be beneficial is if you're meditating for 5 minutes and you use all those 5 minutes to try to do like the hearing, paying attention to hearing to understand the nature of reality. That's just not enough time. And it's like I didn't clear my desk off, but I just brought a notepad and I dug around for a pencil and I'm trying to take notes. Like we're still too messy minded in order to do that very well. Anytime your mind wanders during any of these meditation practices, you can just return with a couple of breaths, like I mentioned earlier. And then, so return back to the breathing focus for a few breaths, and then go back to whatever that very specific practice is. After you become proficient, you may actually not need to come back to breathing. You can just realize, okay, my mind was wandering. Now I'm going to go back to what am I hearing? What and how is that working? What's before the hearing? What's happening in the sensation of hearing, and what's after the sensation of hearing, and what am I in that? Where was I? What was the me in all of that process? All right. So again, the practice, just recapping these in case someone wants to use just one specific slide as a little cheat sheet. Pick one specific sense that you have. I recommend not using thoughts first. Thoughts is a little bit harder. I feel like you have to have insights on the other five where you're really comfortable with the way that works. And then what will happen when you turn and focus on how thoughts work and how thinking is happening, you'll have a big, huge aha, because you realize it's exactly the same. And so gaining those insights through the other ones like hearing and eyesight is actually a lot easier. And then mapping them to thinking is almost magical. So again, what determined the boundary? Was the hearing out there? Then the hearing was coming to me, or where did the hearing actually happen? What was before it? What came after it? And then again, what am I in that? And with that Q&A. So Haldy has not come back, but I do trying to remember one of his original questions.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I just joined.
Yep. So thanks for coming back. I did continue to answer. I'm not exactly sure what happened. So I think I was here when when I was answering your question. So let's cover them again. Um, you asked, actually I'd switch to this view. So you asked a really good question, and it's it's something that's covered in the next slide, but you'd asked about the distinction between breathing meditation and like I'd covered hearing or any of those other senses. So what I said was breathing meditation for me is the foundation. So I always start with breathing, no matter what other meditation I'm going to do. I always start with breathing meditation. Breathing meditation, I was taught actually through Goenka, and he teaches Vipassana, which is the original meditation that Siddhartha Gautama, that everybody calls Buddha, that he taught on how to meditate. So that's the exact form that I use. Now, breathing meditation, if I'm going to do like hearing, I'll do breathing meditation for about the first 10 minutes to settle down. And it's kind of like clearing off my desk space of my ability to focus. And then I can go to breathing meditation, or excuse me, hearing meditation, or any of the other ones that I have, like embodiment meditation and different ones. And when those, anytime I'm distracted in one of those, like, so if I'm doing the hearing meditation and I'm answering those questions and thinking about them and paying attention to that, and then I realize, oh, now I'm actually thinking about work. There are one or two things you can do. Usually it's best to come back to that breathing meditation as your base point for a few breaths, just to kind of refocus, kind of like, again, clear the space off, and then go back into the meditation that you had, for example, the hearing meditation or whichever one that you're doing. After you become fairly comfortable with meditation, if you're doing the hearing meditation and you become distracted, you may just be able to go back to hearing. But in the beginning, it may be easier if you came to breathing first, and then, to kind of recenter, resettle yourself, and then go back into hearing meditation. So they are very distinct. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes, exactly. And my second question, you said with the direct practice or the direct path, you'll be able to see things as truly as they are.
Right.
So, so how does meditation helps someone who does meditation to see objects as they truly are from someone who has never practiced meditation before?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, it so the question is, how does um, how does meditation help you see things as they truly are, different from somebody who doesn't
Yes.
meditate? So it's
Yes.
it's progressive. So it's a path that you take, and there are some things that are easier to understand first than others. If you try to meditate, for example, on the desk, like I was talking about, or if you have a little statue, or like, it doesn't really matter, your house, car, if you try to meditate on those things to see what they really are, and you just sit there and keep staring at it, like, nothing's going to happen. That's not how it's going to work. So that, because those things are further down the path. So the very beginning of the path is exactly where I've started. So you take those six senses, so hearing, tasting, seeing, smelling, touch, and thoughts, thinking. You take those and you examine them. Thinking is one I would say for the end. I said it while you were dropped off, but I'll cover it again. It's a lot easier to start with focusing on how hearing works and what you are in the process of hearing, and tasting and seeing it. It's a lot easier to learn how they work and what you are using those. And then what happens is, when you begin to focus on how thinking is working, you realize it's exactly the same. And you have a huge awakening, or not awakening, sorry, huge enlightenment, huge insight on, oh, this is actually what thinking is. This is this thing that's been going on all along. And when you keep asking that question, where are you in any of that? Like, what's the you in any of those six functions? That's a deep insight. Now, for me, seeing objects like a desk the way that it really is, it doesn't mean that, like, with my eyes, I'm now actually seeing like the Matrix, or seeing something weird like that. That's not what I mean. What it really is after I've learned what I really am through these six things that I gave today, once I've learned what I am, then I can begin to think about what is everything else? How does the rest of this start to work? And then things like, oh, this is what's really going on when I'm looking at a desk. This is really what's going on. And if this is what I really am, then I understand very clearly what the desk really is. I begin to understand what everything really is. So that's more at the end of the path. So the beginning is the six senses that I've given today. There's a middle part. This can happen really alongside with those six, but there's something else that begins to happen where you, as you're paying attention, especially to the thinking and perception, you begin to see that, like an example I give is, for me, I very distinctly saw a woman who's typically very upset all the time and angry. I saw her struggling with something in a crowd, and she was mouthing to someone else in desperation. She was like struggling, trying to hold someone else up, pick them up or something. And she was calling out to somebody else saying, help me. And from a distance, when I looked at that, I realized I could interpret that she's angry that no one is helping her, or that she's just desperate because she's overwhelmed and she can't hold this person up and she really just needs help. And my interpretation of who I think that she is something I'm doing inside of me. And through meditation, and especially observing thinking and the process of perception, you can begin to see how that actually happens. You can see the raw sensation of sight happening, and then an interpretive layer being put on it. And then I would observe other people. They'd say, "Oh, look at her. She's so angry. Like she's always, mad about something." And I think, no, she could have actually just been desperate for help. Maybe she was mad. Maybe she was desperate for help. I can't really tell. But you begin to realize that the way that your perception tells you things are is actually not really real, and so you begin to reject that. And so that's kind of more in the middle, and then eventually you can come to the place, especially when you look deep into yourself to realize what you are. Then you understand what everything else is, and your understanding of the world completely changes. Does that help?
Yes, it's very helpful. It's very helpful. Yes. I'm trying to get a recap of what you have just presented to me today. And so basically, I will have to continue with my breathing meditation. And I don't have to actually have the thought of breathing in and breathing out during my meditation session. But I should focus on the sensation, the physical sensation of breathing in, breathing out.
Yeah.
Asking where do I feel the air when I inhale, and how do I feel the air when I'm exhaling, right? And so that is the basic of all the other practice of meditation. Once I'm able to feel confident in doing this, then I can actually move on to the next one, right? That's
Yes.
what you said.
Yeah. So on the very next
So,
slide, I, once you begin to regularly meditate for 15 or longer minutes, 15 or more minutes, my recommendation is use the first 10 to settle your mind, and then use the rest of that time for whatever the current practices that you're working on. Like if you're going to focus on hearing or any of the other exercises we may talk about. It doesn't do a lot of good if, like, you meditate for 5 minutes and during that entire time all you do is focus on hearing. And the reason why is it's like coming to your desk and your desk is really messy, but you take a notepad or a sheet of paper out and a pen, and you try to take notes and you try to do work. It's like it's still too messy. So it takes that 10 minutes for the mind to settle and for you to become really focused, and then you can really well start begin to pay attention to these activities like hearing. One last thing on that, is the more you do the breathing, just the focused breathing meditation, the stronger that focus of yours will be, and the more productive your other meditation inquiries like hearing, etc., will be.
oh, okay.
And
Okay.
again, um if your mind is wandering, so if you do 10 minutes of focused breathing and then you begin to work on hearing, and then you realize you've wandered. You can always come back to a couple breaths, do, focused breathing, and then go back to hearing. But as I've said, eventually you may even build up to the point where you could just go immediately, like if you realize you're distracted, you could immediately go back to hearing, and not have to do the breathing. But again, that takes practice with time. The more breathing only meditation you do, the stronger your focus becomes and the easier to use that focus is. And then I just had these as like the quick notes of this specific practice of hearing is pick any one of the senses. Again, I would not start with thinking. I would definitely do that one after you've had really good insights on these others. And then when you get to thinking, you realize, oh, that's actually working the same. And it's like, again, it's a huge revelation for you. But start with one of the senses and think about what was it out there and it came to me. Where was that activity actually happening? Where was the hearing actually happening? What are the things that were involved in making hearing happen? What happened afterwards? Like, so I heard something. What was the next things that happened inside of me? And then what were you in that entire process? Just to see that clearly for yourself. So
Okay.
I can't remember. I think you also had some questions at the very beginning. Um, were they covered already, or do you still need have some other questions?
Okay. I was actually wondering. It's not kind of related to meditation, but I don't know if there could be any explanation you can give me on that too. Um, I was actually asking you on WhatsApp when I was having a chat with you on WhatsApp that do you believe that specific numbers could have an impact on one's life?
But it starts with making sure you double make sure you have balance in your life. If you're avoiding negatives, if you're avoiding difficulties, um, then you're not trying to achieve balance. True balance comes by balancing yourself in the negativities.
Oh, okay. So how do you balance yourself in negativity? Like do you like with the example you just gave, as in when I'm trying to avoid negativity, it means I'm not trying to achieve balance in my life. So does that mean I will have to accept some amount of negativity in my life as I have
Yeah.
some positivity
Yeah.
to
So,
achieve a balance?
yeah. So the question is, do we have to accept negativity in order to achieve balance? So, um, really good question. I will start from another side and come back to that. So I would start from the side of what can you change? And so the real question there is control. And my observation and my experience is we have very little, if at all, any control. I personally believe all control is an illusion. Um, I may think I'm in control of things, it's an illusion. It's not really true. I may have some influence, but I definitely do not have any control. I remember when I was a little boy, we went to Six Flags and they have this little boat ride. The people sit in a boat and it goes through, some little jungle thing. And the guy, the guide is always making funny jokes and stuff. And they'd always have a little kid go up front where they have a wheel to turn the boat. But the boat is going on a track, that's under the water. You can't see it, but it's going on a very specific route. But the guy, would have me come up and I remember he asked me to steer the boat, and it was a wheel with a bolt through it. It wasn't connected to anything. I could turn it all I wanted. The boat's still going to go the way it's going to go. This is life. We think that we have the wheel, but life is going by the track underneath the water we can't see. We have no control. We can list all the things that we own. We have no control over them. Someone can come and take them all. We may even think we have control over our own body. One day we will let go of it. We won't be able to control it. We may think, well, I have control of my mind. We don't. When you do the exercise to look into thoughts, you realize you're not in control of even what you think. Um, and what's happening, the thoughts are coming from things that we've heard or experienced in the past. So, all control is an illusion. And since control itself is an illusion, then should we accept negative things in our life? So we can either accept them, or since we can't change them, we can suffer. So there's this equation. And I'm trying to think if I could edit my slide to. Okay, so there's this equation that suffering, the amount of suffering we go through, is equal to whatever is. So if we're having a problem, our boss, our friend, our neighbor, our spouse, our kids, or that guy that hit my car, someone that stole from me, like whatever the thing that actually is ultimate, or what is the reality, multiplied by how much we resist it, this is suffering. So I don't like my boss, so I resist that. And I think all the time, oh, the boss is awful, or my neighbor who said that thing and the neighbor did that. Or my friend, I can't believe what he did. He said this thing about me, or he did this thing, or that guy who hit my car. So we're busy like resisting what is. All of those thoughts aren't changing a thing. Someone hit my car. If I'm resisting it in my mind and upset, angry at the guy, whatever, like, is that changing my car? My car still got hit. Like it makes no difference whatsoever. So when we resist whatever is, it's a multiplication effect. That's how much we suffer. So if our problem is like a 10 and we resist it as a 10, our suffering is 100. It's really big. If the problem is a 50 and our resistance is 0, our suffering is 0. So the way to be free from suffering is to stop all resistance and to accept everything exactly as it is. By this, I want to be really clear. If someone is in an abusive situation, physically and mentally, emotionally, whatever, I'm not saying stay there. This is not what acceptance is. Acceptance is realizing you aren't going to continue to try to fight against it. You may have to leave. You may need a different boss. You may need a different neighbor. There may be some other things, but resisting the fact of what they've done or said or what has happened doesn't do any good. It just causes suffering. Instead, we should just move our resistance down to 0. So we no longer resist it, and instead just focus on what's the thing that I need to do. It does no good to resist what is. So yes, accept the negative things that are happening in your life.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This session has really, really been helpful to me.
Good.
Yeah, I'm beginning to understand certain things in life.
Yeah. So
And
next,
I really appreciate your explanation and your effort. Yeah,
you're welcome. And
I really appreciate that.
in next week, I'll include a discussion, an exercise for meditation on examining our emotions.
Oh, okay.
So that when something has happened, a difficult situation, a problem, and you're in it, like resistance shows up through our emotions. So one of the great ways to achieve peace is not like, let me take just a moment. Some people want meditation just to be, oh, I'm so free, I feel bliss, everything's so happy, and they're really using it as an escape. So my life is miserable and I don't accept it. I struggle against all the problems, so I come to meditate to get away from it and feel good. And really, if you want true freedom, you have to look at what is binding you, and what is binding us comes from our viewpoint and our emotions. So next week I'll give some meditations on how to focus on the emotions that are going on so that we can begin to deal with them. Because as we deal with like anger, irritation, um, all of those types of emotions, we become more free to experience happiness and peace. If we reject anger and we reject those things and try to avoid them, we actually cannot have peace. Again, this is not in balance. If we want to have peace, we have to also allow the anger and know how to work with it, or frustration or whatever the negative emotions are. In order to have the positive emotions, we have to allow the negatives and know how to work with them. So I have some meditations for that.
Okay. Okay. That would be very helpful if you can actually include that in your slides for next week discussion.
Yeah, I will.
Hopefully next week I'll try to bring my brother to on board. I'll tell him about how good the session was today, and hopefully next week I'll try to bring him on board. Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, I look forward to meeting him. What's his name, Hadi?
Pardon me. Sorry.
What is your brother's name?
His name is Abdul Malik. Actually, we are Muslims, so
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Abdul Malik.
thank you so much for coming today. Are there any other questions? Anything else I can help with?
No, not for now. For now,
Okay.
I'm actually good.
Okay.
So you said we can have access to the recordings on your website, right?
Yes. So if you receive the emails, I'll have to edit this one, but I'll go ahead and post last week's up on the website, and then you should get an email letting you know that it is available. If you don't see an email about it today, please send me a message tomorrow, and I'll see what is wrong.
Okay. Okay. All right then. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, thank you. Have a good rest of your day and have a blessed week.
Okay. Thank you so much. Same to you. Bye.
And with that, I'll close today's session. Thank you. And if you're watching this recording later and you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them in. I'd love to help you on your way. Thanks.